Hi, I'm Tasmin Lockwood, a journalist covering technology.
Hi, I'm Scott Steinhardt. I'm a comms person.
So, Scott, before we talk about what caught your eye in AI news this week, I just want to mention to you that I did this fun AI deep fake guess thing that the BBC had running this weekend. So you basically had to pick an image that you thought was AI generated. I lost all three. And the first one, felt really obvious, but no, it was a trick. That person in that image was clearly just too perfect. I was very disappointed at this. And yeah, obviously the whole point in the article was to really hone in on the fact that deepfake images have gotten really, really good. And now I'm just perpetually confused as to what is real.
The experts that I work with on deepfakes are unable to tell real from fake most of the time. And if the experts that have been working on this for years upon years can't tell manually, then yeah, really no one can. I did the exact same thing you did, but replaced BBC with just browsing on Instagram and replaced test with I just saw an ad about human trafficking that was clearly narrated by a AI narrator and avatar. And so I flagged it and I'll send it to you over WhatsApp because it is terrifying.
Scott, what caught your eye in AI news this week?
Apple sued OpenAI Friday afternoon for the alleged theft of trade secrets. This is not the first time Apple has done this with a major company. They did this with Samsung many years ago. In this case, they seem to have pretty damning evidence on just widespread abuse of intellectual property and past Apple employees moving to OpenAI being asked to share prototypes, trade secrets, etc. And it's going to be very interesting because this comes at a really bad time for OpenAI.
And why is this a bad time for OpenAI?
Well, OpenAI is hemorrhaging money. I wouldn't say hemorrhaging so much as, no, hemorrhaging is appropriate. They're trying to go public within the next calendar year. They're losing billions of dollars a year. And they're also trying to break into the hardware market because they can't just make LLMs and sell people LLMs or companies access to LLMs. So hardware is going to be very important for them. They made a giant investment in former Apple head of design, Johnny Ive's company, brought him aboard to make hardware. This is going to probably tie up their hardware making ability for many years to come. Plus, Apple is one of the most profitable tech companies in the world, and they have a large war chest worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Their lawsuit against Epic for Fortnite is any indication, they're going to spend billions of dollars and a lot of time in suing OpenAI from not only preventing hardware from going live, but also just theft of secrets and brazen corporate espionage. OpenAI can't really hang with the billions of dollars that they're going to require in paying lawyers. And so with that, this could tie up an important part of the company's growth. It could also sink the company further in the hole of debt. And whatever the future of OpenAI is, probably not going to be hardware for a long time. And investments that they need to make into their actual platform and training and everything is probably going to just go into paying large legal bills to combat Apple, who will never stop and drag us out for many years.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because it kind of signifies a souring of a once possibly fruitful relationship. ChatGPT was sort of slated for integration with Apple products. Of course, the latest Apple product sort of has Gemini integrated rather than ChatGPT. Of course, you also mentioned Johnny Ive as well. IO Products was named in the lawsuit, I believe, which is sort of OpenAI's hardware segment as a result of that acquisition of Johnny Ive's company. It kind of represents this next era of AI in sort of the fact that we're all talking about infrastructure, right? And it's all about design, the manufacturing processes, and supply chains. These are a lot of the claims, or sort of a lot of the claims in the Apple lawsuit sort of pertain to these elements, rather than, you know, how an LLM is trained or how it's weighted. And it kind of, signifies this next generation of the AI build. And of course, everybody knows Apple for its hardware. You also mentioned sort of lots of Apple employees being at OpenAI now, it's over 400. Do you think that this is abnormal? Does this go past, you know, Silicon Valley, like poaching appetite? What do you make of the scale of the allegations in this lawsuit?
I mean, Apple employees are very valuable. Like how many startups exist in Y Combinator, let alone the greater startup ecosystem that used to work at Apple as like the headline for the founder founding the company. In the great gold rush that was scooping up as much AI talent as possible, Apple employees were very desirable on both Meta and OpenAI from their standpoint. And, you know, Apple spun its wheels for the longest time on AI. If I'm not mistaken, the CFO notably refused to buy I guess the technical term is crap ton of next generation chips for the purposes of AI training, which is why they started off many generations behind and they're now leasing Gemini. As the lawsuit points out, these employees are being asked to show and tell their work from Apple, who's notoriously protective of their IP and has various fakes and fail-safes out there to catch leaks internally and externally. If you look at large language models, which are trained on the sum total of IP and copyright, I wouldn't put it past the company that made that famous from doing the same with hardware and how that company actually operates and runs. So this is not really surprising.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Why would their strategy with hardware be any different from their strategy with training their large language models? Apple have been pretty airtight with leaks, and they're also known from a consumer perspective as, you know, like the brand that prioritizes privacy and security, right? What do you think these kinds of leaks, if they are obviously proven to be true in court, kind of actually say about the current state of security through this sort of lens of corporate espionage, I guess?
This is not unique to the companies in the generative AI creation space in terms of sort of like skirting the law or like moving past and breaking things. I do know people who worked on projects from Apple, a lot of which have never materialized, some for well over a decade, who, you know, even though we're super close, they refuse to share anything out of the fear of, you know, litigation and breaking, you know, secrecy. And also there's just the pride in what people have built together at that company. Obviously AI and the AI work at Apple is lacking, comparatively speaking, to that of even OpenAI, who is probably the least impressive of the three major frontier providers currently, if you were to ask me. I do think that you know, this is a wake-up call for Apple employees, especially departed Apple employees who have moved elsewhere, that if you do part with trade secrets and things that Apple holds most precious, which is IP, you will be prosecuted using their full war chest. I think this will probably prevent further leaks like this from happening, especially as talent goes from Apple to another place. I would not be surprised if this was happening at, you know, other major places of which you're trying to break into the frontier AI market. But I'd be doubly surprised if that didn't stop on Friday at 4:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm. And for the employees who are actually doing this, there are two employees named in the suit. What do you think the motivation is? Is it because Apple's somewhat of a laggard when it comes to the AI race, and they're sort of looking to join forces at one of these like frontier labs? What would be the motivation for leaking in general?
Apple is the hardware company. To chip away at the lead that the hardware company has is not only career making, it's legacy making. So I I'm not a mind reader, unfortunately. Again, if I was, we would be recording this on our yachts. Two ex-Apple employees are named in the lawsuit for completely skirting the law, allegedly, in terms of use of trade secrets and trying to get other people to do the same successfully, apparently. If they were successful in entering the hardware race, a notorious two-horse race, um, it could lead to untold riches and giant legacy that may only be dwarfed by that of Steve Jobs. And insert third hyperbolic statement here, but I mean, if you're able to dethrone Apple on hardware, something that Google, Android, and its partners have tried to do for many years, it's worth hundreds of billions at the very least.
And when OpenAI is sort of pursuing an IPO, this sort of raises the stakes even further, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're losing money. So net loss is at 14 billion. It's expected to make a profit in the end of the decade, assuming that they can get hardware off the ground as well as other projects. That's not happening after Friday, especially with the gargantuan legal bills of which they're about to pay and the delay of their hardware, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, they're losing a lot of money. They're going to take on more debt. In the roadshow to the IPO, they have to prove that they're a valuable company and they can diversify beyond providing a large language model of, fewer people are using by the day.
So tell me then, do you think investors can price this in as a potential one-off risk, sort of if it does continue on the IPO track, or even if it doesn't, like it will ultimately need to raise that money from somewhere. So you just mentioned perhaps it will look for more debt, but ultimately like somebody needs to underwrite some sort of financing. So is this considered a one-off? Or do you think that this represents the fact that OpenAI's model has not necessarily worked in terms of its growth model, its growth strategy is not necessarily worked the way that perhaps it envisioned, and that it will look more and more like a riskier bet going forward?
Unfortunately, I'm the wrong person to ask on this. And the reason being is because I'm a very boring investor. I invest in socialized index funds. And by invest, I mean I haven't made an investment in well over a decade.
Don't worry, we don't invest in Europe. We just save.
And also, if I were an investor, I probably wouldn't invest in anything as risky as an AI company that is losing billions, let alone one that where profitability may happen. No. If I were to invest in an AI company, I would invest in Google because they have the full spectrum of offerings. They make their own hardware, they make their own software, they make their own models, etc. But yeah,
which is what OpenAI is trying to achieve, right?
Yes, the difference between OpenAI and Google is Google has hired some of the smartest people who've actually invented a lot of the technology of which we use on a day-to-day basis and is what is used to pre-train and post-train models. And OpenAI tried to steal some of the secrets related to that in order to spin up a hardware division. Allegedly.
It does have Johnny Ive, though, which is a good get.
Relying on the kindness of one person who hit it out of the park quite a few times many years ago is, that's a huge bet. That's kind of like betting that Conor McGregor will actually fight in a fight and supposed to break his kneecap before entering the cage, and which happened less than 24 hours ago.
So any final thoughts on this story, Scott?
It's something that we're going to have to look at over the next 4+ years. This is going to be dragged out for a long time. And I'm guessing that the preliminary findings and the announcement of the lawsuit on Friday aren't just the tip of the iceberg in what Apple has found. I'm sure they have a pretty solid case, allegedly. And OpenAI's response to it, they have no interest in other companies' trade secrets, is probably the worst response that a crack PR team such as theirs could give for such a lawsuit. I'm not a betting man, but I don't see OpenAI winning this. But we're not going to know even a hint of a verdict or whatever until probably the turn of the decade. So
yeah, I'll tell you what, though, I'm sure you feel the same way, but I would be very excited to see if this goes to discovery and sort of the the information we get to find out when OpenAI has to open its books.
If this goes to Discovery, this podcast will transition to a gossip podcast, and it will be delicious. I'd prefer not to be the OpenAI is getting sued and doing weird stuff podcast, but unfortunately, that's currently sucking out most of the oxygen in Silicon Valley, in the AI space, and the tech space in general.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks, Taz.